Alright everyone, welcome back to another Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes video with Fat Phil, and today we're going to be talking about 5 underrated characters in Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes. Go ahead, like, subscribe, comment, let me know your thoughts. What characters have I excluded from this list? Do you think any of these are actually overrated or that I'm just completely wrong? I'd love to hear your thoughts. So let's give a huge shout out to the channel members, of course. Thank you guys for all of your continued support. Again, guys, if you're ever interested, particularly the Discord's linked down below. Channel memberships there as well, but particularly the Discord. Discord's awesome. There's a lot of really good advice, good conversations being shared there. And of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention those who are on the council. You may not yet be granted the rank of Jedi Master, but you're still very important to me, and I love all of you so much. Let's get in here. Let's talk about these 5 characters. So this actually spawned from a conversation I was having in the Discord where some people were kind of hating on this character, and it is Darth Zon. I love Darth Zon. I think Darth Zon is a fantastic character, and I think he's very underrated. And I think the reason people hate on him is because the SWGOH Omicron has kind of ruined the perception of what Darth Zon does. So let's kind of break down this character. Let's see what he's got going on here. So he obviously is the 3rd member of the Sith Triumvirate, your Sith trio, Traya, Nihilus, and Darth Zon. They're the 3 key characters, and a big part, remember, he's a tank. He's not an attacker, so just think about when you're doing conquest feats, and it's, hey, win without any attackers in your squad. Well, guess who happens to be a tank? Darth Zon. So really useful character here. So let's start with his basic here. On his basic, he's going to deal damage and inflict pain. If they already had pain, dispel debuffs. And this unit takes bonus damage from Darth Zon. That bonus damage adds up over time. You'd actually be surprised how much that bonus damage plays a role in his kit. Next is this. So this is an AoE. Deal damage to all enemies and dispel all buffs on them. So you ever wonder why, a Traya team can really handle Padme? It's because you can dispel all the buffs on them. So any kind of protection up, all that stuff, you keep them from getting courage. Then you're going to inflict pain and reduce the cooldown of this ability by 1 for every enemy without it. So a cooldown of 5. If enemies don't have it, boom, you can, spam this ability. It is awesome. His special here, again, you're going to inflict pain. This attack can't be evaded. That is it. So it's going to go through foresight, blind, all of that stuff. If they already had pain, it deals 100% more damage, and he recovers 35% protection. So in Grand Arena, you'll often see players where when you're using Darth Zon, you try and recover that protection banner using this ability. Again, very good strategy there. And again, it's dealing a lot more damage when people have pain. That's a big part of his kit. Next is Held by Hatred. This is a special ability. Dispel all debuffs, recover 100% health, and gain 100% turn meter. He gains hatred until he's defeated, and whenever he inflicts pain, you reduce the cooldown of this ability by 1. So it's a cooldown of 15, but anytime he's inflicting pain, boom, cooldown by 1. Hatred, 25% critical chance, 100% defense, 100% offense, and when he's defeated, revive with 100% health and gain 100% turn meter. Now, this is the same ability that Reva has. Now, if you remember with Third Sister, she can only gain it like 2 times, right? Like she has it twice, so she gains a stack, but she cannot regain it. Zon can regain this ability as many times as he wants. As long as you don't have a, no revive clause, anything like that, he will continue to be able to gain this ability back. And because it's going to reduce the cooldown whenever he inflicts pain, what will often happen is that with Darth Zon, you can go ahead and reduce the cooldown of this so that way it's ready to use. He may die, and then you can use it right again, and it just creates an infinite loop. Then finally, Lord of Pain is 100% defense, 100% tenacity against enemies with pain. That is crazy. Think about that you're not able to land things like expose on him, damage over times because of all of that stuff. And then at the start of each enemy's turn, if they have it, he gains taunt. Those auto taunt capabilities are huge, guys. I cannot stress enough how much an auto taunt is massive for characters like Darth Zon. Think about General Kenobi. He also has an auto taunt, and that means that it's an ability that doesn't require them to activate taunt. It just happens naturally. At the end of each turn, Zon inflicts pain for 3 turns on enemies who damaged him that turn. When Nihilus and Traya are allied and critically hit, reduce Held by Hatred by 1. Guys, don't sleep on him. I know that he's not on the level of SWGOH, Darth Talon, and like Darth Vader. But in terms of every other game mode, he is massive to that team, really allows you to get the most out of that Sith Triumvirate. I spent a lot of time on him. I'm very passionate about it. Darth Zon, hugely underrated, and I feel like without those Omicrons, it's kind of ruined the perception of how good he is. Like, when you don't have those Omicrons, man, Darth Zon is just so good. Colonel Stark, don't sleep on him. You're going to hear me say don't sleep on them a lot, but Colonel Stark's such a great character. I think, like, he's a Sith Eternal requirement, so you have to build him at some point if you're trying to go for, you know, Sith Eternal. And because he doesn't have a leadership tag, we can use him with Iden Versio or General Veers, and that allows a lot of plug-and-play viability for him that kind of move him in between those squads depending on what you're trying to do. So his basic here, you can inflict defense down, and if they're already debuffed, deal double damage. That double damage is crazy. He can put, his damage output is really, really impressive for a support character. His special here, cooldown of 3, Empire allies gain crit chance up and critical damage up for 3 turns. Critical damage up is a very rare buff to be able to hand out, so, you know, him having that is amazing here, and it's a cooldown of 3, and then he's going to gain 5% turn meter for each Empire ally. So in 5v5, that's a 25% turn meter gain if he's in a full Imperial Trooper team. And then each Rebel enemy is also another 5%. So depending on the team you're putting him up against and who's in there, you could potentially be gaining 50% turn meter with this ability. On his special here, this is an AoE, 50% chance to stagger. Okay, nice. Dispel all buffs on the primary target. That gets slept on. I feel like players don't realize he can dispel those buffs. For each active Imperial Trooper ally, deal 10% more damage and reduce the cooldown by 1. So, in 3v3, this is definitely not as good of an ability, but 5v5, you really get to spam this thing. Next, let's get to his unique. So without the Zeta, he's going to recover 7% health, and then while he's active, Imperial Trooper allies have 50% armor pen, or plus 50 armor pen. This is actually a very good unique. That extra armor penetration makes a big difference in certain teams, really can help increase that damage output, combined with the fact that he's going to be inflicting defense down on his basic. But when you add in the Zeta, he's going to start protection recovery, only 3%, so not a lot, but he's going to remove 1% turn meter from all enemies for each active Empire ally, doubled for Imperial Trooper allies. So, think of him inside of a General Veers team. He's removing turn meter from the enemy at the end of his turns, and then on the flip side, he could be gaining turn meter from those Imperial Troopers. So, a lot of turn meter manipulation in here without really, I feel like players don't realize how much turn meter manipulation this is. That at 10% turn meter reduction is a big deal. Let's get on to the next character here. We've got Dengar the Banner Stealer. This dude is a nightmare to face in Grand Arena, particularly with his Zeta because he's constantly sniping banners. On his basic here, just hear me out. If they're suffering debuffs, 60% chance to call an ally to assist. And if the assisting ally is a scoundrel, this attack is guaranteed to be a critical hit. So, you're putting him in a bounty hunter team. Yeah, he calls Grief or Bosk, that's not a big deal. But a 60% chance to call Boba Fett or Mando, and it's guaranteed crit, man, we're cooking, right? And 60%, it doesn't sound like a lot, but remember, this is not dependent on his turn, right? That's not dependent on his turn. So you have Dengar in a team, and he's assisting. He's got a 60% chance if they're suffering debuffs to call assist. That's when things start getting crazy. On his special, there's a 75% chance to inflict speed down. If they had more than 55% turn meter, or more than 50% turn meter, stunned. On a cooldown of 3, this is actually a very, very good ability that you can kind of inflict that stun if they've got more turn meter, kind of waste their turn. Mini Mind Mayhem, this is the real banner stealing right here. So this is your AoE, right? And you're going to deal physical damage 2 times to random enemies, inflicting, dealing 50% less damage. Then we're going to inflict negative status effects on all enemies that suffer a critical hit. And then effects, depend on the number of crits. So the more crits that you land, you can go from tenacity down, damage over time, to turn meter reduction. And then you're going to apply one thermal detonator to a random enemy for each bounty hunter ally. And you can't counter this attack. I mean, what don't you love? An AoE ability that, an AoE ability that can't be countered can remove turn meter, apply thermal dets. Like, what's there not to love? We're gonna skip his leadership because you're not really gonna use it. But when he receives a critical hit, he gains stealth. When an enemy evades Dengar's attack, 60% turn meter. That's crazy. 60% is huge. Whenever Dengar suffers a negative effect, he gains tenacity up. While he's stealth, enemies can't gain stealth. That is the most important part of his kit. That you put him under stealth and it completely negates the enemy team being able to get under stealth. And then, if you have his Zeta, whenever this ability, triggers, he's going to gain 3% health and protection. That is massive because I've had Dengar time out opponents. This is a very good Zeta, really, really slept on. And then finally, on his payout, 25% offense, 25% speed, and while he's stealth, 60% chance to assist when another bounty hunter ally uses a special ability. I mean, guys, this dude snipes banners. There's a lot of turn meter gain, turn meter removal. I feel like we often sleep on him because he's not like this star-studded bounty hunter like Mando and Grief. But Dengar plays a very vital role in your bounty hunters for a long time. All right, Rebel Officer Leia Organa, put some respect on her name. With everybody going for Galactic Legends Leia now, everybody's going to be getting Rolo at least to Relic 5. And with that, we're seeing more and more where players are struggling to get through teams with her on it because she's got a lot of really good effects here. So, she can inflict buff immunity on her basic. It's not the biggest deal, but she gains 10% turn meter automatically. An additional 10% if the target had full health, and if it's Empire, there's another 10%. So, more likely than not, she could be gaining about 20% turn meter most of the time because she's going to be attacking somebody who had full health. So that turn meter manipulation, remember, this is not dependent on her turn. This is just, hey, if she does this, she's going to gain this turn meter. That, to me, is one of the biggest reasons why she's good. Again, is a lot of these abilities that aren't dependent on their turn, gaining that turn meter. All right, the AoE, the Piece de Resistance. Deal physical damage 10 times to random enemy targets. Enemies struck more than once suffer ability block. This is reduced by 1 whenever she scores a critical hit or suffers a debuff and it can't be countered. You ever wonder why Rolo is the Wampa Stopper? It's the Wampa Stomper. The Wampa Stopper. Gosh, I can't speak today. This is why. Remember, it's to random enemy targets, but if there's only one enemy, it's 10 times damage. So unless your Wampa has a lot of health, high relics, and she's not modded for as much damage, you can survive, right? We've seen it, but a lot of times this will ruin Wampa, and they can't be countered. So even when she calls it in, boom, goes in, Wampa can't do anything. He's just sitting there. Our king, unfortunately, really struggles against this ability. 10 times is crazy. Now, like I've said before, I say this a lot with her. Remember, when there's more enemies, this ability isn't as good. But as that team gets whittled down, this ability gets more, there's more danger with this ability. When you start whittling down the enemy team, it becomes a lot more potent and can really catch people by surprise. Her leadership is amazing in territory battles, but I never use it, so I'm not going to cover the territory battle stuff. But the unique ability, so she has 40% tenacity, and the first time each turn that she resists a detrimental effect or suffers a debuff, she gains 15% turn meter. So you try to put a debuff on her and it lands, 15%. You failed, 15%. Gotta love it. You put the Zeta on her, she gets 10% additional offense. And when she suffers those debuffs, she's gonna gain 35% offense, stacking until the end of her next turn. So if you're going up against her and you've got a team that's inflicting debuffs, she's gaining additional offense that's going to stack until her next turn. And imagine that her first turn is this thing. I mean, you could be in for a world of hurt. Finally, guys, the last character here on this list is the Kaidi Mundi for Scoundrels, Queel. I know a lot of you are going to say, Phil, why didn't you buy that Lightspeed bundle? And I say that I have about 50% regret for that some days I'm like, man, I should have got that. And other days I'm like, no, you know what? I'm good. This dude is the Kaidi Mundi for Scoundrels. So we're going to start with his unique first. So Queel and droid allies recover 20% protection whenever an enemy is inflicted with shock. We'll get into how that happens. When IG-11 is an ally, Queel and him have 10% health steal and 30% potency. Queel can't be critically hit or stunned, and whenever IG-11 is critically hit, he recovers 20% protection. But here's the big part. You throw a Zeta on him. At the start of battle, other droid and scoundrel allies gain 40% of Queel's max health, offense, potency, and 40% of his max protection until the first time he's defeated. So once you kind of kill him, even if he's in a Vandor Chewbacca squad, this goes away. But 40% of his health, offense, potency, and then protection. So think about using him with a Dash Rendar team. they're gaining all of these stats before you get to Queel. And if you've got tanks to protect him, going to be very difficult to get at Queel, and they're going to be dealing a lot more damage. So that's the Kaidimundi part. On his basic here, just inflict burning for 3 turns, okay. But here, deal special damage and stun them for 1 turn. Inflict shock and speed down. If they already had burning, inflict expose for 2 turns. If they already had shock, inflict shock on the weakest enemy that didn't already have it for 3 turns. So a lot of ways to deal shock here, and this is a cooldown of 2, so you can really spam this ability. Like with Queel, you're often going to be using this and spamming this when you can in order to get those shocks and be recovering protection. Then his I Have Spoken ability, all allies recover health equal to 20% of his max health and 20% of his max protection. Doubled for Droid and Scoundrel allies. Then Scoundrel allies gain 25% turn meter and mechanic savvy. So if you ever wonder why Dasher and Dart teams are so good, it's because if you have a fast Queel, you can juice them up right away with 25% turn meter. And then they're going to gain the, mechanic savvy, which does this. So for droids, extra offense, and when defeated, they revive with 80% health or protection. That revive is brutal when that happens. And then for scoundrels, 20% critical chance, 40% critical damage, and defense penetration. He is, guys, this is just, I feel like so often he gets slept on in favor of other characters. Queel really makes scoundrel teams scary. So that's the list, guys. 5 characters that I think are underrated, that get slept on, that we just don't really have the... I feel like a lot of players don't really understand just how good their kits are until they come up against them and they're like, what the heck just happened? Telling you guys, all of these characters, very, very good. And even at the end stages of the game, there's some really good uses for them. Obviously, as you progress more and more, you're not using some of these characters as much, but that's because you're going to have Galactic Legends and Bane and Bo-Katan, but for a long time, these characters will make up what I consider to be the backbone of your roster. So that's the end. If you're still watching, Wampa loves soda in the comments. I love you all. May the Force be with you, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.